Discovery.
On Discovery?
More Discovery.
Discovery is on the air right now, so watch the show.
It's back.
Yay! Hello, everybody. Welcome to Into the Wormhole with Larissa and Lauren. I'm Larissa Maestro, your captain, and here with me, as always, is my number one.
Oh, I thought you were going to say my name. It's Lauren. Howdy, everyone. Howdy from the Space Cowboy.
We have a really exciting episode today, but before we get into that, I need to tell you both something, which is really important, and to everyone listening. I just started watching Murder, She Wrote again. And let me tell you, there are just Star Trek cast members in this show all the fucking time. And I'm losing my mind, and I needed everyone to know this. Like, literally, like, Kate Mulgrew, Renee Auberjonois, LeVar Burton. But then, also, like, the guy that played Worf's adoptive brother. The guy that played Janeway's dad in that one episode. Gene fucking Simmons basically playing Admiral Satie again. It's just like, yes. And I highly recommend it. Go ahead and rewatch Murder, She Wrote. There are 12 fucking seasons of this excellent show.
Wait, is Gene Simmons the guy from Kiss?
No.
Who am I thinking of?
I mean, Gene Simmons, Jean.
Oh.
She played. Remember the episode, The Drumhead, TNG?
All right.
She was the like gorgeous older admiral with that like amazing cut dress that was evil.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just needed to get that off my chest right now. It was really important for me to say. But now I can introduce our very special guest. I'm so excited. He is a Tony-nominated writer. Yes? Is that correct?
True. That is correct.
Oh my
That's
God.
correct.
And a current writer and co-executive producer on Star Trek Discovery. We're both from the same hometown, Ithaca, New York, and I saw his name in the credits of Disco this year, and I was like, okay, what the hell? Kyle Jarrow is with us today.
Hey, woo!
Yay!
Hey, it's good to be here. Hey, guys.
Just so excited to have you on. Like,
I'm excited to be here, and we have not seen each other for probably at least 20 years, so
at least.
that's
I
amazing.
know.
Yeah.
Have you been back to Ithaca much?
Well, not since the pandemic, because I have young kids, and we kind of haven't wanted to fly because one of them's too young to get vaccinated. So I guess it's been probably almost 3 years, almost maybe more, since I've been back to Ithaca. Yeah. How about you? Do you go back? You're on the East Coast, so maybe it's easier to get back.
Yeah, my sister and brother-in-law and nephew moved back to Ithaca during the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
To be near my parents. And so there we're all together. I was really jealous. And I've been able to be back a couple times just because over the past year I've been on the road with an artist. So we've been nearby and like,
oh, that's nice.
Been able to get through Ithaca. But being back in Ithaca it's a trip.
It's a trip. Did you guys live like downtown type area, or like we lived like 20 minutes outside of Ithaca, like middle of nowhere?
Brooktondale.
Yeah, almost Caroline. Yeah.
Yeah. My parents live like right down the street from Caroline Elementary.
Oh, wait, really? Oh my God. So
yeah.
Our parents are actually really neighbors. My parents live off of Snyder Hill Road.
Snyder Hill?
Right before it hits 79. So like basically
oh my God.
Right there. They live like 5 minutes drive from each other, I think. Yeah.
Oh, that is so bonkers.
Yeah, that's so weird.
Yep. Wait, did you go to Caroline?
Yeah.
We went to the same. Wait, that means that we went to elementary school together.
That's true. We would have, right? Because I guess I'm 4 years ahead of you in school, right?
Yeah.
So you would have been, I guess, in first grade when I was in fifth grade. Or no,
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
We were in
Aw,
elementary
you
school together. Yeah. How
guys.
weird is that?
This is really cute.
It's so, pretty wild. Do you remember that place,
my God.
Munchies?
Yes, I do.
I just want to say that calling a place Munchies is just hilarious to me, which I didn't realize until much later in life. But I don't think it's there anymore. It's like self-storage now or something, right?
Yeah, it's not a restaurant anymore. It was a strange spot for a restaurant.
It was, yeah. Lauren, this was a place where it was called Munchies, and it wasn't really a sit-down place. It was kind of like you went up and you could order like ice cream or hot dogs or whatever, and then they had like picnic tables. But it was in the most random place, just on the highway in the kind of the middle of nowhere. But it was there a bunch of years, and we would go. I remember my family would go, and we would get like soft serve ice cream.
Gotcha.
It was
That
really
was
the
the
only
shit.
place near our house at all that was like that you could get food.
Yeah, it was like that, or like you have to drive to East Hill Plaza.
See there, it served,
which
it
was
served
like
a purpose.
15 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. So we both grew up in like the outskirts of the Ithaca area.
gosh.
I mean, it is like pretty rural out there for sure.
It really is.
That's got to be pretty surreal then, Larissa, for you to be just watching one of your favorite shows and then to have this name pop up in the credits and have one of those moments where you're like, what? But that Kyle?
Yep.
I'm surprised that you even remembered my name, honestly.
Absolutely did. I saw your name and I was like, oh my God, I know him.
No, wait, did you know my sister? Because she's a little closer to your age. She would have probably been a year younger than you, maybe.
Yes, she was. My sister is 2 years younger than me. So my sister, then Heather, then me, then Tate.
Wow,
Like,
you
all
know
in a row.
everyone's names. This is like amazing.
I do.
Wow.
I went to school with all of these people.
I know, but I don't know your. But and you have an older sister too. You said no.
No.
Just
a
younger
younger
sister. Okay.
Yeah.
That's so funny. When you said she had kids, I assumed she was older, which is totally. There was no reason to assume that.
Yep. She acts like the older sibling.
There we go.
Traditionally, like the older sibling. She has a family and a house, and they're renovating it. And I am just here in Nashville in my weird room.
I don't like the use of the word "just" in that sentence. I'll dispute that, but anyway,
I'm doing okay. I think I'm doing okay.
you're doing great. Also, by the way, as someone who has two young kids, like it's wonderful. Lauren knows this too. It's wonderful. Also, there are a lot of wonderful things about your life that I think we probably are both envious of.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I had my second kid during the pandemic, too. They just turned 15 months.
wow.
So that's like a whole
Oh
new
my
level
God.
of,
Wow. Pandemic baby. Oh, that is wild. Okay. Wow.
Yeah, not a
I
true
know.
pandemic baby. I got pregnant right before the pandemic, and then
Got it.
we
Okay,
had
so
the,
it
we had the
wasn't a choice
shutdown.
of the
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't like, oh, we don't have anything to do. We just have a toddler running around.
Can I just say I know multiple people who made that decision during the pandemic. And
Really?
I was like, that feels like the opposite decision to
Right?
make during an apocalyptic pandemic.
Well,
But-
and here's
Yeah.
I was pregnant with my first child during Zika. I don't even know how to pronounce it anymore.
Oh yeah,
But,
Zika. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just like I think every time I get pregnant, I don't plan on having another kid, but something goes wrong with the world.
Oh, good. Yeah, please don't. Because
Use
I
that
think
as
the world's messed up
inspiration
enough.
for a new episode. Seriously.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Well, I have a question. If I can just
Yeah.
kind of start us off on Star Trek talk, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
Kyle.
let's talk about Trek.
First of all, I want to say, Kyle, like I'm very excited because I see you've oh my gosh, you write for shows, you conceptualize shows like Valor that's on Netflix. You've worked with the SpongeBob SquarePants with the SpongeBob musical and got nominated for that book, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah,
Totally.
and so now you're on Star Trek, so you've obviously covered like many genres. But can you, again, for our listeners and for me, honestly, tell me what your title is and like what that means?
Oh yeah, sure. So I'm a co-executive producer, which I know sounds like what does that mean?
Yeah.
Right? It's a very weird term. So in television writing, writers are also producers. It's just the way the industry has developed, and what that means is that like let's say like on a movie, right? The boss on a movie is the director. Like the writer of the screenplay often isn't even on set for a movie, right? Like the director's the boss. in television, writers are the boss. So if you create a television show and if you're the showrunner of a television show, which means that you're the boss, those are always writers. So television writers are expected to write and produce. Oh. And because of that tradition and that way of the industry working, there's basically a bunch of different titles that describe what level of writer you are, seniority-wise, which affects like how much you get paid and also affects, to some extent, not how much control you have,
but maybe like how much
seniority, whatever,
commitment to the show.
Sure. Yeah. It's more like, in like a corporate structure, like, are you a vice president or are you like a manager? You know what I mean? So co-executive producer is like the second highest level. And then the highest level is executive producer. So I think you could look at an executive producer maybe as being like if you imagine the showrunner of the show, who would be an executive producer, but is like the top one. In our case, it's this amazing writer named Michelle Paradise. That is her real last name.
Yeah.
So she would be, imagine that she's like the CEO, and then like the other executive producers and co-executive producers would be like vice presidents, I guess would be a way to think about it. What it really functionally means is that I'm a writer on the show, but I'm one of the more senior writers on the show.
Okay, so you're involved. I mean, we watched an episode that I guess was like written by you fully, which was the examples from season 4. But you are involved with all the writing and the episodes to some extent. Would that be fair to say?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's 100% correct. But that's actually true of all the writers. So
Okay,
little fun fact. Back in like the 90s, right? So like TNG era, Deep Space Nine, right? Back then, those shows, as I'm sure you guys know, did a ton of episodes per season, right? Usually like in the upper 20s, right?
Yeah.
That was an older model of TV. And in that model of TV, there was often a writer's room, which was like the sort of core writers, and they would come up with a lot of the storylines and they would write most of the episodes. But they had to make so many episodes that other people could come in and pitch ideas and then get hired to write just one episode, right?
So they were kind of like freelancers.
Yes,
sorry to interrupt.
Exactly. Yeah. They're called freelance episodes.
And they also had that open call thing for a while, too, where they were just like accepting stories from like fans, which is so cool and cute.
That's what Measure of a Man was. Remember, that was that woman's like first script, and she was a lawyer.
Yeah, it's like so that, and they had so many episodes that they had to do each season that it really opened up room for that. So that model, not just by the way in Trek, but in all of TV, that model has really gone away. And so now on most TV shows, there is a writer's room, and those writers also write all the episodes. Occasionally, one script will get freelanced, but not on our show. And that's relatively rare in the industry now. So the way it works on Discovery and most TV shows now is that you have a writer's room with however many writers that is. It's usually between like 6 and 12. Those people come up with all the stories together. So literally like on Discovery right now, because we're still a bit in the pandemic, it's on Zoom. We're literally all on Zoom, all these faces, and we're throwing around story ideas and brainstorming and coming up with like the arcs for the characters and blah, blah, blah. Then individual writers or sometimes pairs of writers get assigned particular episodes to write. But even on the episode that you are writing, the idea and the story of the episode are still being developed with the input of those other writers. So really what I'm saying is it's an extremely collaborative art form, and really all of the episodes are created by everybody. The credit that you see written by is really honestly the person who wrote the first draft of the script. But even when they were writing that first draft, the story that they were writing and even the structure of that story was developed by the whole room. And that is typical of most TV shows now, and definitely true of Star Trek Discovery. So by which I'm just saying, like, I wrote that episode, but like what that really means is like I wrote the first draft of that episode. Do you know what I mean? And like,
yes.
And like then the showrunner does a rewrite on it, and like that's also very common. So it's I guess what I'm really doing is letting you behind the curtain of all of TV, which is that when you see a writing credit for an episode, it means that writer wrote the first draft and really had their hands on it. But there's a whole lot of other writers who were involved in the making of that episode whose names are not after the written by.
So you mean these writers aren't just sitting alone in a hotel room with a typewriter by themselves and just writing the final thing alone with their glasses on and then handing in their piece of paper?
Not. But I think most people think that is the case.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's interesting, I will say, for Trek fandom, or maybe I think this is true of any series with a deep fandom, sometimes it can be tough for the individual writers, because if somebody doesn't like something in an episode, they'll come after that writer. But a lot of times that writer maybe didn't even choose to do that particular story element. It was developed with a room of writers. So sometimes it can be really tough because a poor writer is trapped trying to defend something that, not that they didn't believe in it, but it's not like it was their unilateral decision. So it's interesting. I think there is a general misunderstanding in the public about how TV writing credits work. But it's understandable because, like, when it says written by, like, of course you think that, like, a novel that says written by somebody, like, that person did sit in a hotel room and write it. But in TV, it's very different. What I'll say about that, though, is it's kind of wonderful because writing can be such a lonely pursuit. And there's something wonderful and really exciting about being in a room of people who are all writers and throwing around story ideas and having it be this push-pull and like, I have a thought and you build on that thought and whatever. So that's one of the really cool things about how television works is that process.
I love that. I actually have I have a question, which is, so the change in like the way that the writer's room and writer's credits works, when I think about that, I think about how TV used to be more self-contained within episodes, and there weren't as many like long arcs. So like when you look at a show like Discovery, you're really looking at a show that tells a longer story over the course of a season as opposed to a small story and then everything's reset. Like Lauren and I talk about this a lot with TNG and with Voyager specifically, that like you watched the show and then like nobody ever talks about Tuvix again. You know, like he's just gone and that's it. But when you get to a show like Deep Space Nine, that starts to change. And that, I feel like when I think about longer story arcs, I think about Deep Space Nine as kind of changing that paradigm for the franchise of Star Trek. They started to actually tell a longer story, and then that longer story was not just in seasons, it was like the whole fucking show was like a huge bonker story. Do you feel like that kind of shift? I feel like television around that time, that's when it kind of started shifting from being like adventure of the week to like the show is a thing. Like it's The Sopranos. It's like, it's not Seinfeld, you know?
Yeah. I think that's right. I mean, there are some structural reasons that it happened. Like, you know, those Trek series, I think including Deep Space Nine. Well, you know what? I may get this slightly wrong, but I know that like TNG was a syndicated show, which basically meant that it was produced and then sold to different networks to air. And so I don't even know that all the episodes aired in the same order on like every, like, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And that was
like,
the beauty
of
it.
Sort of selling a network, like, here's a bunch of episodes. So I think that was one of the reasons that you literally like couldn't tell a serialized story, because you couldn't even be sure that like the episodes would play out the way you intended, right?
You weren't sure your audience was going to actually pop in a way that was going to make it sense. So yeah, it's like I remember watching back-to-back episodes of any program, and it would be like, well, if you watch it at 4:30, it's season 2, episode 13. But then if you come back at 5:30, it's season 5 episode. But it was okay because you could literally just pop in and watch a little 45-minute story that was self-contained.
And there was an even bigger reason, which was that back then, if you missed an episode, there was no way to see it. Right?
Yes.
No one had DVR. No one had TiVo. If you guys remember what TiVo was.
Oh, we're old.
But you know what I'm saying? So if you missed an episode of TNG, like you missed that episode. Like maybe it would air again like next year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it would be really kind of mean to the audience to require them to have seen every episode. I think by the time DS9 came around, I believe it was still in syndication. And so I sort of feel like they split the difference a little bit, which is that they told these long arc stories, but also you could sort of drop into a DS9 episode and like you might be a little confused about like some of the relationships, but you could still get a really close-ended story that would give you like a satisfying episode. And I think as an audience member, you wouldn't sort of feel like, what the hell is happening here, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's how I kind of felt dropping into your episode. Because I mean, I was talking to Larissa and Kyle, like I've only seen guys, listeners out there, because of a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, I haven't really been able to take in Discovery. So I've seen like literally 3 or 4 episodes.
Oh yeah, you're probably so confused.
Well, there was like the initials for the dark matter anomaly, the DMA, and I'm like, what the fuck was the DMA? But then I
totally missed that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I could figure it out. I could be like, all right, gotcha, big threat.
But it's raised a good point. But so unfortunately, I can't help you with having a 3-year-old.
No.
But the thing is, if you wanted to, you could instantly go back and access any previous episode of Discovery you want. And that's the world we live in now. And so I think what that's done is it's allowed more serialized storytelling to happen, because there isn't this thing that if you miss an episode, you can never see it. And to be honest, I think most viewers probably do start at the beginning of series. I would guess this is true of all series, not just Discovery. Maybe you sample an episode in season 4 or whatever, but then I think a lot of times people will go back, start at the beginning, and like catch up. And so that has really changed, I think, the way TV storytelling can work. Again, not just on Trek, but like throughout the ecosystem of TV. Anyway, so you raise a great point, Larissa. Like I think that has really changed, but a lot of the reason is just structural about how we consume entertainment now, and that you can just like binge the whole thing at once or go back at the beginning and get caught up. But I will say, you still need to create an episode that is satisfying to somebody who doesn't know anything. So like in the examples, there's a closed-ended story about this like prison that they have to. So we do still try to give within the serialized storytelling a nice story arc that will give you like, a fulfilling emotional journey as an audience member, even if you don't know, like have a deep knowledge of the bigger story. So that's honestly like a really tough line to walk, and we really work hard to do it. And I sort of think that is the challenge of all TV now, is like you gotta deliver serialized storytelling, but can you also make sure that each episode is a satisfying meal in and of itself?
Well, and just to make sure I didn't give the wrong impression, like I had that experience. Like I was able to walk in and I could figure it out. Like, this is a threat. And then, like you said, there was sort of this little nugget of a story within that 15-minute arc of, the jail and stuff. And I was able to latch on to that. So it's been great, because the episodes of Discovery, Larissa knows this, I've had to jump around. Man, I've just been spat in the first episode I saw, the doctor died. Okay, now he's alive. What happened? And then I got to see the Mirror Universe episode, and it's like,
oh, that's a very confusing one to drop into. Yeah, okay.
But I get it. But that's the point, is I get it.
Oh yeah, she has missed full seasons of character development. Yes.
Yeah, but you guys do a really good job of just like those. It's part of a bigger picture, but I'm able to enjoy those episodes still.
Oh, I'm glad. I mean, Burnham as a character in particular has changed so much since season 1. Like, I can't even imagine just like popping in on a season 1 episode and then going to season 4. You'd almost be like, is this the same woman?
It's kind of fun, though.
That's what's so great about the show, right? Like, she's really evolved from like mutineer to captain. You know, it's like, what a cool arc to show for a character.
Well, and also showing her express emotion in a different way as well.
Yes.
Like, that's been, for me, my favorite part of her character is how controlled she was trying to be at the beginning of the series, and how like open with her crew she is now, how open with her friends and her family about her emotions.
I'm glad. Yeah, that's definitely something we really wanted to explore. Yeah, she's opened up as a person. Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle, can I ask you a quick question before I forget?
Yeah.
For our listeners and for me, how long have you been involved with Discovery?
Okay, good question. I started on season 4, actually. So the season that's airing now, and we're currently working on season 5, which I'm also working on. Ooh. But now, that won't... Actually, I don't even know that they've announced when that's going to come out. They have announced that we're doing it, but, you know, this show with all the VFX, right, it's massive, and it really takes a long time to produce. So I'm not sure quite when it's going to come out. But sometime, probably next year, I would assume. But
so you mean Discovery is not a model ship that's shot in front of a?
Is it in your garage right now?
I have it right here. No, it's amazing.
Painting it with tiny brushes.
The other thing is, I bet you guys don't even think about this, but so like now Discovery season 3 and onward, we're in the 32nd century, which is the furthest in the timeline that any of the series have been. And basically there's hollows everywhere and like all this cool super futuristic stuff, but they're all VFX shots, right? Like every hollow, it really, like some of the other treks that are a little bit earlier in the timeline, there are fewer VFX shots because they're using little like physical pads or whatever. Ours are all like hollow pads. So it's so much VFX, and our VFX team is unbelievably like incredible. But doing that kind of VFX takes a really long time. So it really, that's a big part of what makes the show special, but also what if fans are wondering like, why is there so long between seasons? What the heck? That's why, honestly. It's, takes a while to write and to shoot, but then there's all this amazing VFX work that also has to be done.
I can say as an illustrator, I totally understand, because people are like, you can just do that in like an hour, right? And it's like, no, I can't.
Oh my God, we've talked about this.
I'm going to need at least 4 days.
I'm not really involved in that part of it at all, but I see their amazing work, and I see...
But you're a writer, so you are. You're like, so that leads to my next question, which is like, so we've talked on our podcast about the animated series and what that has been able to do for Trek as far as like allowing for different kinds of life forms to be presented on screen, for like there was I forget what was Slaver Weapon, right? There was that episode of the original animated series where there's like a weapon that like every time they push a button on it, it changes shape. So that's not something that's easy or simple to do with practical effects, right? Like, and this is the original animated series, right? Like this is like old animation. So they had the opportunity to like write a show where there was this thing that did this thing that you can't actually make do in the real world. So I kind of imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like, isn't it kind of cool to be able to like have a VFX team that's not like, you're not saying like make this thing and then they have to like sculpt it out of clay and then like draw on it and then make it a certain, like, and figure out how to make this lever move or whatever so it does the thing. Like they can go into a computer and create something that does the thing that you want them to do.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is like, the VFX allows different kinds of storytelling than you were able to do in some of the earlier treks when those tools didn't exist. You're totally right. Yeah, like DS9, like if they couldn't build it, like they couldn't show it on the screen. You know what I mean? And like there were limits to, every alien had to be somebody in prosthetics. Like there could not be a fully CG like creature. They just didn't have that kind of technology back then. Certainly not the budget of a TV show back then. Mm-hmm. But yeah, now we can do stuff like that. So you're right. It does open up the kinds of aliens that we can create. It does open up the kinds of technology and the kinds of worlds that we can show, for sure. I will say that VFX also costs a lot of money. So like, it's not that we are completely without limitation, but we are less limited for sure than, back in the 90s and the early 2000s. So yeah, we can really let our imaginations run wild in a really cool way. And sometimes, to be honest, sometimes it's like, well, that is a dope idea, but like the VFX costs of executing that would be crazy. So let's like slightly dial that back. But we never approach story from that perspective. We always approach it from what's the coolest story that we can do. And then we figure that story out. And then if there are some limitations around, and this, by the way, is also true of all TV shows, then if there are limitations around like, what's affordable VFX wise, or how many locations can we realistically go to and things like that. Okay, then you figure out how to take that story and slightly revise it to fit your limitations. But we really try to have a really wide open imagination when we're first going into story. And I think that probably is a little bit different from some of the earlier treks where there were just things it wasn't even worth thinking about because there was literally no way that they could have possibly executed it.
Or they just were given leftovers from Lost in Space in the studio next door, and they had to just paint them a different color and use them.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I will say, though, like, I grew up watching TNG, which is maybe what you guys did. That's probably what you did. I mean, I think it's really age related, right? So for me, it was TNG and then Deep Space Nine were really sort of my entry point to the franchise. And going back and watching those episodes now, right? Like obviously the VFX are really old school, and
they're
clearly
charming, and I love them.
I know, but exactly. There's something about it where it's like the storytelling is so good that you just sort of accept it and it doesn't bother you. And I really kind of love that about classic Trek. And I do think one of the challenges of the new Trek is that we have all of these tools of VFX and whatever, and that suspension of disbelief is a little harder, right? Like if you're watching DS9, you're suspending disbelief. Okay, that looks like a model, against a black background, but I'm going to just not worry about that. I'm just here for the storytelling. But I think
goop is Odo.
Yeah.
Yes.
That goop in that bucket is Odo. And I believe it, even though it's
ridiculous. But there's something about the photorealism that we can do now with VFX that I do think, in a way, it asks the audience to imagine less, if that makes sense. And this is not just for Trek, right? Like this is all of filmed entertainment. I do sometimes feel like, man, I think there's a bit of a loss there. Yeah. That the audience isn't being challenged to use their imagination. I don't think there's anything to be done about it, but it's just so interesting to think about my personal experience watching newer Trek with photorealistic VFX versus watching DS9, for example. And I find myself more able sometimes to just live in the story of it in the older version, because I'm just sort of like, oh, that's what this is. This is a story. You know what I'm saying?
Definitely.
It's very complicated. But it's not, again, not just Trek, right? It's like watching the original Star Wars.
Yeah.
Those effects look kind of janky, but you don't care. You just sort of go along with it. Whereas like now, if you're watching Mandalorian or whatever, if a special effect looks janky at all, it really like takes you out of it. You know?
Well, talking about
Absolutely.
practical
You're
effects.
totally true.
Sorry to interrupt, and I hope it's
No,
okay.
They're all practical, yeah.
And when you talk about practical effects, you have David Cronenberg is on the show, which was a complete shock to me. I didn't even know he acted, but he was in the episode you wrote briefly. And I was like, is this the same guy? But we've talked about him with Voyager's Threshold episode and body horror and stuff like that. But I mean, he was like a king of practical effects with The Thing and all these things. And
oh, he's amazing. Yeah, he he has done some acting. I think he was on the TV show Alias, if you guys remember that.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I never knew that.
Yep.
But it's certainly not. I mean, like, he's a director.
Yeah.
But and he got involved in the show in season 3, which predated me. But my understanding is that Alex Kurtzman, who's one of the creators of Star Trek Discovery, is a huge fan of David Cronenberg and Discovery Films in Toronto. And I believe that Toronto is Cronenberg's home base, kind of. So I think they were like, he's amazing. We're fans of him. Pretty sure he spends a lot of time in this town where we shoot. Like, why don't we just ask if he would be on the show?
That's awesome.
I'm not sure. Again, I wasn't there, but I think it was kind of that simple. Yeah. And he was like, I like Star Trek. Like, great. And he is so...
Oh my God, I love it.
He is so good. And can I just tell you, such a wonderful person and so professional. A lot of non-actors have trouble remembering their lines or like, do you know what I mean? He shows up on set, knows every single word. In my episode, he has this like epic long monologue.
Yeah.
First take, he had every word. Like it, and that is actually really amazing and surprising.
Okay.
So he's
really
such a
fucking
pro,
impressive.
Such a good person for someone as famous and accomplished as him. Again, I barely interacted with him because of COVID. I didn't get to go to set, which I'm really sad because I'm a huge fan of his. But you know when they say like don't meet your heroes? Like, this is a hero to meet. He's such a good guy. Like I couldn't believe it. Yeah. And just so humble and like I'm here to like shoot a scene in a TV show and I know all my lines and I'm ready to go. You would not even know that he was this rock star director. You know what I mean? It's really it's really actually really inspiring and nice to see.
And he did so good. I love it. I have a 2:00 and he just goes away in the episode.
He's honestly, he's just kind of the greatest.
I wanted to talk to you because Larissa's a creative. She's a musician and a composer. I'm a creative as an illustrator and you're a creative as a writer and a musician. And, they always say like, write what you know. And I'm really curious if COVID and the pandemic and all those unique experiences that you guys are experiencing are influencing your writing in any of the episodes that you're doing for Discovery or if it's just like, there's a plan and we're just sticking to it.
Well, I mean, listen, I think when you're a writer or any artist, whatever you're living through is always going to find its way into the work. It's almost just sort of inevitable, like whether or not you consciously intended to. I think it happens. The tricky thing is that if you write too much to the moment, by the time the show airs, right, the moment may have shifted, especially now we're living in this like crazy, like roller coaster of a time, right? So when we were writing season 4, it was basically the beginning of the pandemic. We were writing most of the season before the election as well, before the 2020 election. So, if we had written like super like bad version, which we wouldn't have done, but if we had like say a presidential election, by the time the series aired, the season aired, excuse me, we would have been long past it. So it would have felt like sort of dated. You know what I mean?
Or I just didn't know if it was like, if you're just feeling like I want an episode where one of the characters is weighted down by 2 small creatures that constantly want its attention, or it's like as a parent, or like I could understand where it's like those personal.
I'd say that more general stuff for sure. I will say about season 4 in particular, it's about the DMA, which is this sort of like unknown or initially not, poorly understood threat.
And
feels
that's
like this massive.
It's a dark matter anomaly, right? Correct? Just to make sure if listeners don't know what we're talking about.
Dark matter anomaly, yes.
Okay.
There is no question that was influenced by COVID, by this feeling of, and I'm not saying that it was like an explicit metaphor.
Sure.
But certainly while we were writing this, we were dealing with, at that time, an unknown disease, right? That remember, people were wiping down their groceries and stuff. We didn't know.
I was.
Yeah. And so, and the other thing is, I think season 4 is a lot about grief, to be honest. I think that's a theme that is really, has really sort of emerged. And that also, I don't think was really something that we necessarily meant to bake in. But as we were writing this season, grief was just everywhere. So many people were lost to COVID. And of course, anyway, no spoilers, but for folks who haven't watched it, but there's certainly some reasons organically that grief would figure into the storyline. But I just think that theme of grief and how you deal with grief is, again, not something that we explicitly plan to get in there, but because we were all living that, I think it just kind of infused the writing. So point being, I think Trek and sci-fi in general is a wonderful way to speak to the moment that we're in, but through this slightly removed lens, right? I think that's something people have always loved about it. Because of the lag time between writing it and it airing, it's tough to get super topical. But when it comes to sort of more general feelings about the moment that the world is in, I think that's something Trek has always done a great job of speaking to. And that's definitely something that it has infused itself into Discovery this season, at least, for sure.
That's what I love about Star Trek. That very thing is what I love about it, what has kept me in Star Trek. And I really do feel what you were just describing, that grief is a character in this season.
Yeah.
And the way that all of our characters interact with grief is so wrapped up in the storytelling. It's very beautiful watching all of, because everyone responds to it in such different ways. And I'm
so glad that's coming through. Yeah, it's funny. Again, it's not that we didn't know that grief wasn't going to be part of the story, but I do think the extent to which it, to my mind, has emerged over the course of the season is kind of what the season is about in some ways, is really interesting. And again, I just think it's because of what we all as writers were going through, in the world that we were living in as we were making it. Yeah, and it's interesting. I too love Trek because of the way it speaks to the world that we're in, and that's been true since TOS, right? In some sci-fi series, there are others that do it, and then there are others that don't. Star Wars, for example, I think is really not particularly interested in talking about the world we're in, and that's fine, right? It's an escapist entertainment. It's more interested in that and sort of action adventure. And certainly
give us more Baby Yoda.
And
that's
Baby
what
Yoda.
we want. Give us Baby Yoda. We want more Baby Yoda.
Yeah, which is great. You know what I mean? But I do think Star Trek has always, and not that there's not action adventure, and particularly in Discovery there is, but there's always been a different thing on the mind for Star Trek, which is how does this story resonate with the world that we're in now? And I also think I'm sure this isn't lost on anyone who watches Discovery. There's also a real effort in terms of representation on camera and making sure that the show is diverse and continues the tradition that TOS started of breaking some social barriers in terms of casting and storylines. So, that to me is another thing that I just find really inspiring about Star Trek, is that it I don't know, it's always sort of aspired to do that, and we try to do that on Discovery too, which is a long way of saying that I think it's kind of nice that this is a season about grief, because I think probably most people watching it are dealing with grief in various ways and PTSD about the pandemic. And like, maybe the show can allow people to work through that a little bit. And I think that would be a wonderful gift to give to the audience.
Yes. I'm appreciating it.
Larissa, I think you and I have enough time for one question each. I don't know if you have one or...
Yeah, I'm so sorry. What I actually have to do when I get off is go into the writer's room.
All right.
Oh, so exciting.
Okay. I just want to pitch some sort of space being that every time they get pregnant, they cause like the gravitational pull of a planet to like, let real life inspire discovery. I'm just putting that out in the world.
I love it. My thing was there. I sometimes feel like growing up in Ithaca made my love of Star Trek deeper because of the community in Ithaca and the way that Ithaca is. Like, Ithaca is an aspirational place. Like, the culture in Ithaca, people are trying to be better. People are trying to do a better job. At least that's how I always felt when I was
I think you
up.
have a different experience of Ithaca than I had, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. Did
not,
you not have that experience at all?
My parents are pretty politically conservative. So I think you're sort of speaking probably to the like very progressive values of Ithaca in general, but that was not really my experience of it. I mean, in some ways, just because there's a little bit of that baked into the town, but I think my sort of home experience was different from that. But I definitely hear what you're saying, that Ithaca in general, it's a college town. It has a very progressive reputation. That's definitely true.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, little things like, you remember Ithaca Bucks?
Yes. Although that's not a thing anymore, is it?
I don't know if it's a thing anymore, but
Ithaca, they were actually called Ithaca Hours, Larissa.
Oh, Ithaca Hours. Yes. It was like their own currency, but it was like you work for, it was like you didn't have to like.
The idea was that every hour of work should be worth the same amount. So the idea was that an Ithaca hour, I forget what it was worth or whatever, $20 or something. So it was like you would pay for things with Ithaca hours, and it was supposed to be like, so let's say I bought like a piece of pottery. I would pay you however many hours that pottery took to make, right?
Oh, wow. Okay, that's interesting.
Which is an interesting idea. It's like a very sort of utopian idea of like all work should be equivalent. But it was, of course, instantly perverted. And I remember seeing like, I think it was like my friend was telling me their therapist took Ithaca hours. But it was like 6 Ithaca hours for 1 hour of therapy.
1 hour. And
I was like, this system's already broken now, because that's the exact opposite of the point of what this is.
Yeah, that's not what we mean.
Hey,
that's not what
Kyle,
we mean.
if you're about to go in the writing room, I mean, you got to take this idea with you. This definitely sounds like something that needs to be explored with an alien civilization.
Yeah, but you're right. There was a real progressive... I can't speak to now, but certainly when we were growing up, there was a real sense in Ithaca about trying to embrace progressive values.
Yeah. And I mean, that's definitely my experience, because like I come from a very progressive family, and it's a mixed cultural family that, I mean, I saw myself represented on Trek for the first time when I was a kid, Miles O'Brien and Keiko O'Brien.
Yeah.
They looked like my family, So it felt like home. And, then leaving Ithaca and realizing like that the world was much scarier than Ithaca was. I always kind of felt like Ithaca was this enterprise in a way.
Wow.
For me, at least. Yeah.
That's deep.
It was that it was a safe place to be. Well, and that I would be seen and understood there.
I will say that I think that's probably true of a lot of Trek fans, that they looked and continue to look at the series, see themselves reflected there, and it does feel like a safe space that is somewhat utopian too, right? Like, we're in a post-scarcity society, and I think that is one of the wonderful things about Trek. It is aspirational as a series, 100%. And I will also say that, like, maybe this is just my friends, I don't know, but like when I took the job on Discovery, I was really surprised at the friends of mine who are big fans of the show, are mostly my friends of color. Like, I really think there's something about Discovery in particular. You know, we have a black female captain, right? Like, I think
big
that
deal.
there's a lot of people who, you know, really see themselves reflected into the series. And in that way, it's been their gateway drug into Trek as a franchise. And I'm just really proud to get to be part of that. Like, I think that's really special, you know?
Yes.
Well, I have one last question from me.
Yeah,
and
hit it.
It's all right. Very simple. Do you have a favorite character or just a character you would love to write more for?
Oh, on Discovery?
On Discovery, yes.
Wow, what
or
a tough...
any Star Trek
Okay,
character.
we'll open it up. Yeah.
Can we expand it?
We will. Do you have a favorite Star Trek?
Star Trek character?
Sure.
Cisco. You know, if I could have written for that character, I just
cool.
Just what a great character, what a great actor. Such a weird actor too. Like, but it's like somehow works.
Yes.
Yeah, really, really, it would be Cisco, hands down. Yeah.
One of our past guests did the best Cisco impersonation. It was great.
Oh, I wish I could. No way.
Yes, our holiday episode was Joy to Bejor, the emissary.
That's
has
amazing.
come.
That's amazing. I also love how Cisco, like in the first season, looks completely different than he does in like the later. It's like you're like, is this even?
When they finally let him shave his head.
Yes. They were just like, do you, man? It's kind of amazing.
I love it. I love that choice.
I have to say goodbye.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure talking to you guys. Larissa, it's been nice seeing you
so
after
much.
20 years.
I know. I'm going to like keep like emailing you and
please do stay in touch. Yeah,
prepare.
It's really been nice to meet you guys. I've really enjoyed the chat, and I hope that you and the rest of your listeners will watch the rest of the season. Episode 11 of Discovery Season 4 is airing, I believe, tonight, or maybe it dropped at midnight this previous night.
Ooh.
And then we've got 2 more episodes. So, you know, if you haven't watched, please catch up. And the season finale is in 2 weeks. So, yeah,
oh my gosh.
check it out.
And Kyle, I look forward to talking to you more when I've seen more Discovery.
Yeah, awesome. Really nice to meet you guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Kyle.
Take care.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Find us in the collective at intothewormhole.show, on Instagram at intothewormhole.podcast. Into the Wormhole is brought to you by We Own This Town.
The goop in that bucket is Odo, and I believe it, even though it's definitely not. Definitely not.